cash transfer, adding that Marsabit County has spent 900 million from procuring the relief food from one person where corruption is faced, requesting that tendering should either be given to women and youth groups for their benefits. Right, I want us to now start our interview in studio. I'm joined with Wajir Speaker Abdile Yusuf to discuss some of the issues that are affecting Wajir County. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Right, let's start with, of course, some of the issues that are affecting Wajir County. How dire is the situation when it comes to drought?
Very dire indeed, and currently I think of all the northern regions, probably the most affected is Wajir. The entire pastoralists have now either shifted to parts of Mandera, parts of Garissa or Tana River, and what is making the situation worse is that they have left the most vulnerable people, women and children, in the centers. So there are quite a number of internally displaced persons that have accumulated themselves in new centers that are quite far away from towns that have been there. Mm-hmm. And this is putting a lot of pressure on the county government in terms of trying to provide water, food, even security. So the situation is quite dire at the moment. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, Fatih, I think this has been an issue that has been living with us for close to our independence days.
Right.
And I think what is relevant now is not to talk about the drought and the famine and its impact on the society. Mm-hmm. But we need to find out how can we put a stop to this and what are the solutions that we can put in place. Mm-hmm. Because if for 60 years we know that it's a constant, that every year when the rains fail, you have to go and look for relief food. We have to track water to settlements. We have our livestock wiped out, and we know it's a constant occurrence. Then it will be foolhardy of us to be pumping and putting all these resources for a period for the problem to recur again. So I think it's time as leaders, because the business of leaders is to provide solutions to the problems that we have. But if these problems that we're dealing with recur, then it means that we are not providing solution. So I think the focus now going forward will be how do we, for example, say in Wajir, we know the drought is going to be there. And in fact, now it's a global issue. Climate change is a global matter. Right. And it's not going to get easier. It's going to get worse. So what are we going to do so that we stop this idea of providing relief food and tracking water to people? Because the amount of money that we spend year in, year out on this matter is enough to change the whole of Wajir into a bread basket that provides food even to the rest of the country. But
my question to you is, you have said that this has been recurring even from independence, and leaders know that this has been happening. So the county governments from before have not been doing anything at all?
I do agree. But I think history is there for us to learn from it. I know there were mistakes that were made. That's why I say for 60 years we have been talking about this matter. I think we just need to focus forward, both the national government and the county government. At the moment we are providing relief food. The county is doing quite a lot. We have just passed a supplementary budget, close to 500 million shillings, carved or hived from development projects into recurrent to provide water, food, and also to combat diseases, anthrax and cholera that are now prevalent in the county. But the most important thing for me and for leaders, both at the county and the national level, is for us to say, in the next 3 or 4 years, this idea of us providing emergency relief food will be no more. Why? Wajir is a very vast land, 58,000 kilometers squared. You can put Nairobi, central Kenya, Nyanza, and western in Wajir, and you will still remain with land. We have reservoirs of water, proven. other than the people who depend on the civil service, the rest of the people who live in Wajir are unemployed. So we have human labor, we have vast land, we have water. At this age, why do we have to depend on relief food?
So what new thing are you then doing?
I think the main thing that we need to do now, and this, it will take the cooperation of both the national and the county government, and a paradigm shift in the way that part of the region is viewed. Because we remember that was an area that was marginalized before we had this 2010 constitution, and therefore in 1967 there was that economic social paper that was passed, which classified certain areas. They were deemed not to be contributing much to the economy, so they were forgotten. The 2010 constitution changed that. But there are aspects of the lives of Kenyans that are still at the national level. For example, now agriculture is partly devolved. But in terms of policy, we require the help of the national government. In terms of dams, boreholes, so that we completely focus on how these counties that are at the north can be converted into bread basket, instead of them burdening the national government in trying to provide relief food during the drought region. What about healthcare? If we were to get into the other issue, of course, how's the healthcare system in Wajir? You've just talked about cholera in the area. What is making the situation now a bit difficult is we are in a drought times. There's scarcity of water. There's high levels of malnutrition. So that powder cake is proven to be a bit tough, and it becomes easy for these outbreaks to occur. But the healthcare in terms of the county, it has very much improved for the last 10 years. We have close to 700, 800 staff. I remember when the revolution was beginning, I was part of the county public service board then. We only had about 125 staff in the entire Wajir county. We now have close to more than 800 staff that are working in the sector. So there's a lot of improvement in that region. But it is just the drought that's making things a bit difficult. That's why it's easier for these outbreaks. But it's being contained. The county government is doing quite a lot. So that is the situation now. Right. Earlier on, we were talking about electricity and the show, of course, the high cost of electricity. But the situation is a bit different in Wajir. I mean, with regard to, blackout in the area. Yes. Tell us more about that. We are in a very tragic situation in terms of power. We use a diesel generator. I was conversing with somebody who works with the local office of KPLC, and he told me that that generator was installed there in 1967. So Wajir County is using a generator that was installed in 1967, and probably the population of that area has grown like 10, 20 times. So what has been happening is that power was being rationed. But now the generator has broken down. So for the last 1 week, there was an entire blackout. In the whole of Wajir? In the whole of Wajir, the headquarters. Of course, the other centers, there was no power even before. The power was just localized at the headquarters. And all facets, all aspects of life depend very much on power. Take healthcare. In the hospital, the theater depends on power. Incubators, they depend on power. For example, let's say there are fridges that contain blood and other incinerators. The reagents or something like that. They contain, the fridges contain those things. So if there is no electricity and the hospital is depending on a generator, a small generator, the cost that the hospital is incurring is expensive. The generator itself, sometimes it becomes unsustainable, it breaks down. So what is going to happen is that the theater, the incubators, those fridges that contain these important elements and chemicals, they are put to use. You end up not using the theater because you don't have electricity, and you put the risk, the life of people in harm's way. Incubators, where early born kids are incubated.
Yes.
You put them in harm's way. So it's a total travesty of justice that 60 years after independence, we're depending on a generator. And this has been an issue that has been recurring. I remember in 2013, when the former President Uhuru Kenyatta and the current president were on the campaign trail, they promised that in the next 5 years, the country is going to be connected to the national grid. It never happened. In 2017, they came together and their platform was provision of electricity and the connection of the county to the national grid. It never happened. And that has been the case. Every election season, Wajir is promised that they will be connected to the national grid. But now the situation is getting out of hand. Now with the drought, we are thinking of coming up with alternative sources of livelihood so that people don't depend on pastoralism and livestock, because it's normal.
Yeah, before we get back to that, I mean,
Yes.
we're still talking about the blackout that's happening in Wajir.
Yes.
I mean, of course, after the constitution now, we have the devolved counties.
Yes.
What is the county of Wajir doing specifically
Yes.
when it comes to the blackout of no electricity in Wajir?
Yes, KPLC is a monopoly. That part is not devolved.
Yeah.
So there's not much the government can do. Probably on a humanitarian effort, they can chip in. But that function is not a devolved function. KPLC is a parastatal, is a monopoly. There's not much the county government can do at the moment. But there are certain aspects of national government function still the county chips in on a humanitarian basis and just to support the people of the Reni. And there's now a plan to have solar panels, but to a small scale. It will not be able to do the work that KPLC is expected to do and the national government is supposed to be doing. So it's not a devolved function. So you cannot say, I'm going to set aside these resources for KPLC functions. That's the problem that we're having. It's going to be a bit illegal. But even with that, the attempts that are being made with the help of development partners to erect solar panels. But that's something which is in the pipeline. But this is not a devolved function. There's not much the county government can do at the moment.
Right. What is the status of the education system in Wajir? Are children going to school at this particular point?
Even this power issue affects education. There's a lot of progress that has been made. The main problem that exists now is TSC teachers as compared to the rest of the country. There's a huge gap which needs to be filled, but it cannot be done overnight or in a short term. And sometimes back there was an attempt when Honorable Amina Mohammed was the CS Education, that there should be an attempt to provide an affirmative action in having for about 5 years people who have not attained the minimum grade required for entry into teaching training be trained for about 5 years. Because affirmative action today in the world, to qualify to institutions like Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, and those premier institutions, it's not necessarily that everybody is given the same opportunity. The people who have lower level of grades attain entry on an account of affirmative action so that they can make a change in the society they come from. So if we are given about 5 years to train as many with those lower grades and they're equipped with the skills to teach, I think that will have made a very much difference, because at the moment, not enough people who have that grades graduate from the secondary schools in that region. And because of the insecurity in the region, teachers from other parts, when they get the certificates and they are registered as teachers, although the place is relatively safe and there's not much harm that is exposed to these teachers, TEC is a bit hesitant when complaints are made to them to keep them there. So they run away. So that is the problem that we're existing. The main issue now is teacher inadequacy is the main issue. Yes.
Right. Thank you so much for that. That is the Wajir speaker, of course, talking to us about different issues that are happening in Wajir County. That's it for News Center. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Fatia Mohammed Noor. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.
Thank you.